had a jury trial out in this little remote area, and um, it didn't matter what I said or did. The judge, and usually I get along splendidly with the judges, even with the opposing side. It's not usually the issue, but this specific judge, it just didn't matter, and so it was lost from the get-go, which interestingly, I can't try to talk it there. We ended up getting some good wins out of it because there were some significant appealable issues. It was so bad.
Hello and welcome to the Attorney Post, where we give you the inside scoop with top attorneys in their field. And now, here's our host, Justin West.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Attorney Post, where we discuss what's going on in various facets of the law with attorneys at the top of their game to help you navigate the various ins and outs of legal fields and jurisdictions. Because, as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Today, I'm very pleased to be joined by Jerry Wallentine, who runs the eponymous law firm that bears his name, Wallentine Injury Law, out in Kansas City, which is just a stone's throw from me here in Atchison. Jerry, how are you doing today?
Man, I'm doing great, Justin. How are you?
I am doing good. I happen to know that Jerry just got back from an exciting trip to Machu Picchu, though it sounds like he probably shouldn't have drunk the water. So maybe we'll talk about that here in a minute, too. Before we get started, let's take a jump over, though, and look at Jerry's website. So, Jerry, again, I assume you can see my Zoom is acting funny today, ladies and gentlemen. So give me just a minute to re-zoom that, make sure it went right. There we go. Jerry runs, obviously, the law firm that bears his name. You can visit him online at kc-attorney.com. That's kc-attorney.com. He has a slogan, Need Jerry, so his phone number is on the Kansas side, 913, on the Missouri side, 816, and then 934-NEED, like Need Jerry. That's 913-934-NEED, or 816-934-NEED. Many of my listeners may not be fully aware that Kansas City is one of the few odd states. Missouri is weird this way, actually, because they get like the big half of St. Louis and they get the big half of Kansas City, but it's a city that's split right down the middle. And so part of Kansas City is in Kansas and part of Kansas City is in the Missouri side. But Jerry obviously works with people on both sides. So if you are injured and you're in the Kansas City area on either side, please feel free to reach out to Jerry. And as always, we will have his information down below in the box. Our first sponsor today is Groove Funnels. Attention, entrepreneurs and dream chasers, listen up. Running a business online doesn't have to mean drowning in subscriptions or wrestling with messy tech. Groove.com or Groove.cm is rolling out a jaw-dropping limited-time offer. You can run your entire operation, think stunning websites, with Groove pages, high-converting sales funnels, email campaigns, webinars, e-commerce stores, even affiliate programs, all absolutely free for an entire year with no credit card required. That's right, over 1 million users are already saving thousands of dollars and scaling their businesses smarter with this all-in-one platform that replaces tools like ClickFunnels, Shopify, and more. There is no risk, no hidden fees, just pure, powerful growth potential in these tools to help you focus on what matters: building your empire. But hurry, this deal will not last forever. Jump in right now and see why Groove is the secret weapon every entrepreneur needs in 2025. Visit theattorneypost.com/groove to sign up completely free today. Again, not even a credit card is required, and you'll get a full year. And again, if you can't make it profitable in a year, just cancel and never pay a single thing. That's theattorneypost.com/groove. Our second sponsor is Habanero Social. What if Google could send you free clients every single month? With Habanero Social, it's not just a fantasy, it's a reality. Our AI-powered platform optimizes your Google business profile to attract local customers effortlessly. From cranking out high-quality content to managing reviews and fine-tuning your local SEO, Habanero Social handles it all while you sit back and watch your business grow. 85% of local searches happen within the Google Maps pack. That's the place you need to be to capture those clients. An optimized Google business profile doesn't just show up, it engages and builds trust. It increases clicks and ultimately boosts your business. And that's why Habanero Social is so confident that they guarantee you will see page 1 rankings in that map pack. Stop wasting time on old school tactics. Habanero Social automates everything you need to rank higher, engage better, and drive more clients to your business. Visit habanerosocial.com right now and let the AI do the heavy lifting completely risk-free. That is habanerosocial.com. All right, that was a mouthful. There we go. Well, again, I've got Jerry here with me today. Now, Jerry, who sometimes goes by Wally, Wallentine, I'm assuming the Wally is an abbreviation or a take of your last name, but if I'm not, please feel free to correct me. But he is a seasoned attorney. He's got at least 19 years of experience under his belt, focusing primarily on personal injury law, especially car accident cases on, again, both sides of the Kansas City divide. He's represented more than 1,000 clients. He was shaped by humble beginnings. He had a father who was a factory worker who himself gave up school to support his family, and his mother was, in fact, a trailblazing teacher who defied expectations to earn a master's degree. He is himself a former full-time minister and currently ordained Nazarene pastor, and he sees both faith and justice as intertwined in his calling to serve others. He brings a client-first philosophy to every case, emphasizing clear, truthful communication and zealous representation. Again, he's licensed in both Kansas and Missouri and has served as a pro tem judge and is an active member of multiple legal associations. Through his firm, You Need Jerry, and he continues to fight tirelessly for the injured, ensuring that they get the compensation and the respect that they deserve. Now, that was a mouthful, and I feel like I never, ever even get to scratch the surface. So my first question, Jerry, to you is simply this. What did I miss?
What did you miss? Oh, well, you got my names, two names. So I didn't even know Jerry was my real name till I was like in 5th grade, right? So I'm a junior. My dad was Jerry, but I was just called Wally forever. And apparently my dad was called Wally at work. And so one day my parents were like, well, you want to call me Wally or Jerry? And I was like, I didn't know there was an option. So, pretty much throughout my whole life I've been called Wally, but then we made a decision when I, graduated from law school. I was like, should I really go into court and be like, so-and-so appears through attorney Wally Wallentine? And so we thought, well, let's just get, Jerry's my official name, my legal name. So we should use Jerry. So
you're in the legal space, use the legal name.
Exactly. Right.
Very important question. What's your favorite Disney Pixar movie?
My favorite Disney Pixar? Well, okay. I wasn't watching a lot of Disney movies, because my kids are older, but now I have a granddaughter. She's almost a year and a half. And so we started watching Frozen, and it's a whole nother thing when they'll let it go, and they just, the girls go crazy over that. So that's probably.
I was curious if you'd ever seen Wall-E, because of course there's a Pixar name.
Right? Yeah, Wall-E. Yep.
Anyway, keep going and fill me in on what we missed, because again, there's a lot to know and a lot to unpack on who you are and what you do.
So personal injury, love personal injury law. A firm here, there's 11 of us here. And so we actually, we have 4 attorneys, and then, 5 paralegals, and then we have an office administrator, and then we have actually just in the last couple of weeks, we hired, because we're doing so much, personal injury, dealing with, medical injuries and stuff like that. We hired an in-house medical professional. So he worked in ERs many years ago, and he did that for years. And so he's our newest hire, and he's just really helping out. So, I come here every day, not to get away from the wife, because I love my wife. We're have fun, but it's just so fun here. So we come here and we're doing good stuff, and this good team. So we're just trying to make a difference for the people, and trying to be a family here too. So.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So now, obviously, I know what you do, and I've let my listeners know as well. But if I didn't know who you were and what you did, we had 30-second, 45-second elevator ride up, and I said, "Hey, Jerry, what do you do? Give me your pitch for your firm. What's your elevator pitch? Why do people choose to work with your firm?"
That's a great question. People don't know at first, right? Because they're out there in all kinds of places. But when they finally do come and they're happy here, they see that, we're very hands-on. So we're not just, people, they realize they're not just a number, like at maybe a big firm that has 1,000 cases that come in. We're big enough to where we can bring the heat, but we're small enough, and we have enough personnel and staff that we're like on top of the case. And the people like, man, you guys really care, because we do. And so we're trying to back that up. So that's probably the difference is our personal service, and that we're really trying to, make a difference. So I was, you said earlier, kind of giving my bio, I'm an ordained Nazarene minister, and I was actually in full-time ministry for, many years. And so my wife and I were like, is it time to, go after the 8, 9 years of full-time ministry? They're like, hey, is it time to go to be a lawyer now? Because I thought I was going to be a pastor for like a year, and it just kept going on and on and on until I feel like the Lord has given me a release to go to law school. So it was finally in '03 when I went to law school, and I bumped it up fast 2.5 years, and now I still do ministry. Like I was just yesterday, I was at a church leading worship, but this is like my main gig now is doing personal injury stuff. So,
Oh, it makes sense. What's your favorite book of the Bible?
ooh, probably Romans.
Romans.
Yeah, Paul. Romans chapter 12 verse 1-2 is pretty powerful. That's
Yeah.
that's that's, that's why I like.
You like the as they call it, the Romans Road? You go through that one?
What do you mean by the Romans road?
So it's a common apologetics practice about salvation and the process of salvation. I know a lot of people. I'm actually Catholic, not Protestant,
Okay.
but I talk to a lot of people, and it's one of those back and forths that we often have in our dialogues and discussions. I can talk about philosophy and theology all day
Well, we
long.
could
Like
talk
that really is.
theology. I love that discussion. So,
I'll have you on my other podcast,
okay, all right.
called Authentic Christianity, and we can sit down and we can talk theology as well, because that actually sounds like a good time.
Fantastic. What do we call the lawyer post or the theologian's post
There you
versus
go.
the attorney post? All right.
Well, let me ask you this. What got you into law then, Jerry? Like, did you grow up watching, Perry Mason reruns, or was this, because you kind of mentioned that you looked at being a pastor, but somehow you got into law and somehow you got into PI. Where was the shift that was really, I mean, you kind of said you got this call, but like, tell me about why,
Yeah,
was
well,
it this for pastoring?
it was, I've wanted to be a lawyer for a long time, right? And I just didn't, and I was thinking, I'd go to law school after college, but just the Lord had different plans. And so I ended up, going, so I will tell you a little story. We'll go back to the theology, I guess. Not really theology, but it was between my junior and senior in college where I really felt like, and I told she's now my wife, but my girlfriend at the time, I was like, I really feel like I'm supposed to go to this very specific church and do their youth ministry. And I ended up being a senior pastor later, and I didn't tell anybody else because I didn't want to do that. And she didn't tell anybody else. And then that pastor ended up calling me and saying, I really feel like the Lord's telling me that you're supposed to come here and do that. And I was like, okay, I guess I better do that. So I ended up doing that, 8, 9 years. I went into doing legal stuff. And I didn't know what kind of legal stuff I was going to do. I didn't really have a passion either way. I ended up starting doing criminal. I did know I wanted to do jury trials because I really like connecting with juries and I really like doing that kind of stuff. And so I ended up doing, a lot of criminal stuff for the first several years of my career until, I've always done some, injury, but over the years just became more and more injury, less and less criminal defense. Till now it's like almost it's exclusively personal injury.
Gotcha. Um, that's really fascinating. So do you do still have some criminal cases though? Is that the case?
Very few. So like sometimes somebody like we get calls still, but I'm usually like no, and I just refer them out to friends. But once in a while, like I took a case a couple months ago where it was a very niche issue that me and actually somebody I know who's now a judge, we had like written a motion together on this issue, and it's a niche issue like 15 years ago. And so that issue came up and he's actually a judge now. We had written the motion. I was like, I'll take that case. So I'm like filing the motion. And of course the judge knows the motion because, and so sometimes, or if it's a case where I feel like, man, somebody really needs some help here or something's really going on and I have a special attachment, I'll take them on. But for the most part, I try not to. I try to really stay focused on the personal injury. But I do have a few out there, but it's not, I try not to, but I know the prosecutors, I know the judges and that are in that field. So I'll still do it once in a while, but not for the most part.
Gotcha. No, it makes perfect sense. So let me ask you this. Now, I don't live very far from you, obviously. You're in the Kansas City area. I'm like the outskirts of Kansas City by many people's estimations, 45 minutes or so of a drive. And obviously 4 or 5 years ago, we just got through going through this silly pandemic thing. I'm really curious what your experience was of that, mostly because you split the state and you're on both sides. Did it affect you in general and your firm? And was one side easier or harder to work through, Kansas, or Missouri?
Well, first of all, everybody was just staying home, but we were, lawyers, and what we were deemed, these uh, needed services. So we were we were kind of immune from the laws of staying home and stuff. So we continued to come to work, and we had things that had to be addressed, and a lot of lawyers were just staying home. So one thing I guess it did do is it did make our workload a little busier because a lot of lawyers just weren't available. So we kind of took that on. And so we were out there, meeting needs still. What it did do though is, courts were changing some of the rules, the speedy issues. They weren't having jury trials. It really changed that up. So it kind of set our docket back a bunch. And then, once they started, some courts were quicker to, I think I was in one of the first courts to start doing jury trials, and we were like one of the first jury trials, right? And so that kind of changed. And Zoom's now like a regular thing, and they're kind of changing that back up and having, the courts are saying, no, let's come back. And I like going to court, and especially here, like I'm here across the street from the Johnson County District Court is my Olathe office. So, so I like going over there, or to, go up to Kansas City. So I'm glad that they're trying to bring that back in, some of the in-person, but it's good. Some Zooms are appropriate, and it does help a lot.
Awesome. No, it makes perfect sense. That's the reason I do this podcast now. I started this podcast over a decade ago, and we ended up losing, oddly enough, our channel over a weird duplicate content issue, and I just kind of gave up on it for a while. And then the pandemic hit, and one of the reasons we used to run it using what was called Google Hangouts at the time, and it was this really awkward technology. I'd like walk people through how to access it and use it, and they had to have a Google account and everything else. And I was like, ugh. And I didn't have to try and talk people how to download and install Zoom. Like that just seemed excessive. But then the pandemic hit, and with the pandemic, all of a sudden everyone knew how to Zoom, and so we're like, hey, this is the perfect time to reboot the podcast. So we've been doing the podcast ever since, just because Zoom made it so much easier to do, and everyone knew how to Zoom. Did you ever have to do? You said there were no trials, so no like Zoom juries you had to sit in front of or anything like that.
I had some I had so I had with one judge, I was like, Judge, I really need this to be in person because I wanted to be able to cross-examine the people, and the judge was like, nope, it's gonna be via Zoom. And I was like, and this was actually just with the judge, it wasn't a jury. But so it was kind of a big legal issue. So I thought I had no chance because I was kind of being like real, stickler. I was like, no, we need it, and you're not going to be able to see what's going on. And we actually won and it was like an all day kind of thing. I didn't know how that was going to go, but yeah. So we've done some significant things over Zoom, but it's it's all right. But I greatly prefer in person and actual being there right in front of the people. But we've done them, and we can do it. And we've even so that jury trial I told you about, one of the first ones after they started opening up the courts.
Yeah,
it was an in-person jury trial, but some of the witnesses, like one of my witnesses was the expert witness from Canada. So, and they wouldn't allow any of the trial. It was strict. So we had to have pipe him in via Zoom, and people, I think they were more okay with it, knowing because the COVID stuff. And so, my preference isn't to do it that way, but and so it's just kind of more complex even now to have some of your witnesses show up via Zoom.
gotcha. I've heard some people speculate. They said, some people would say that a Zoom jury would feel like it would be more impartial because they're more like just a panel of impartial observers. But other people are like, I would hate that for a variety of reasons, including the fact that, as one attorney put it, he says, sometimes something will happen in a trial and a witness will just say something, and that it's BS, right? And you're able to look over at the juror and they look at you and you guys connect immediately. You make eye contact and you just know the juror's reading you, you're reading the juror, and you're like, they got that point. They understood that this was not what's supposed to happen, or this was supposed to happen, whatever it happens to be. And I feel like with Zoom, you lose some of that. So do you see a future where we do all Zoom, or do you think that'll never be the case?
I don't think. I mean, you shouldn't never say never, but I just that argument that they're just impartial, I just don't think that's even close to accurate. I think because they're going to have all these other things around them, and so I think there's much more partiality, and plus a lot of partiality is really about their preferences. And just because they're watching Zoom doesn't suddenly mean they have a preference for or against personal injury. That doesn't, I think it's that whoever said that there's kind of missing the point of what partiality really is. You know, just watching a Zoom doesn't make you suddenly a neutral observer. It makes you an observer with your still partialities. I just don't know what they are. And I just can't see on your faces how things are affecting you or not. It just makes it more unfair, I think.
You also can't see if they're like, looking at their phone.
Right.
I'm sure there'd be some sort of a process for getting them in, but hopefully we never go back to that because, knock on wood, hopefully that never happens. Okay, so let's talk more about you and your practice a little bit. You've been practicing law for at least 19 years, according to your website. I think it's a little bit longer, but websites get updated when they get updated. And I'm sure that in that time, Jerry, you've probably had some great successes, but also some setbacks, some things that you would consider, for lack of a better word, a failure. Can you let my listeners know about one time in your practice of law that you experienced a failure, but what did you learn from it, and how do you take that experience and carry it forward to make sure you're always giving the best care to your clients?
Probably my biggest, I had a jury trial out in this little remote area, and it didn't matter what I said or did. The judge, and usually I get along splendidly with the judges, even with the opposing side. It's not usually the issue, but this specific judge, it just didn't matter, and so it was lost from the get-go, which interestingly, I can't try to talk it there. We ended up getting some good wins out of it because there were some significant appealable issues. It was so bad. And so we ended up getting some wins in these other ways. I'm trying to speak in generalities because it's kind of a hot topic issue. But, one thing I did learn is, if I go into something like that and, the animosity is clear, and I haven't had another, quite like that. I think it's just be quick to, bring on co-counsel. And I always have, like if I have like an issue, like a certain injury where there's a real niche issue, I'm like, hey man, bring in co-counsel. So it just kind of, reminded me to, if there's some kind of issue where you can bring in co-counsel, and like in this case, it would have been good maybe if I would have brought in like some local attorney there that like was, knew the players. Those things aren't supposed to matter, but it just did. And so I think just, being really quick to, bring in co-counsel, because in the end, I'm happy to, split fees and take less money if it means a bigger win for my client. So I think that's just just being quicker to bring in a co-counsel in the right kind of situation.
Oh, it makes perfect sense. It takes a little bit of humility too, which maybe being a pastor helps with that. I don't know.
Oh, I don't know, right? It should, but
yeah, theoretically, it comes with the territory, but obviously we're all fallen individuals. So, so the flip side of that coin, though, is of course I'm sure you've had in your 19 plus years some great successes. Let my listeners know, Jerry, about maybe one or two of the moments in your legal career that you're just the most proud of. Things that are the proverbial feathers in the cap, so to speak, that when you're laying down at night, you're falling off to sleep and you think back, you're like, oh man, I can't believe that worked out so great, or whatever it happens to be. What's one or two of the biggest successes you're most proud of?
it sounds like a small story, but it was big for me, because it was a tiny case, right? And it was one where I'm gonna make a lot of money, but there was somebody, they did get injured, but the bills were small, but the insurance company, they offered $3,000, and why am I even bothered? I mean, I'm losing money, right? And so and the insurance company knows, oh, no attorney's going to take on this case and go to jury trial and waste all their time. And I was like, man, it's the principle of the matter. I took on the case. I love my client. We're going to do this. So, we ended up, I can't remember we got a verdict, like, I can't remember, like 34,000 or something, which is nothing, but it was, 11 times more than what they offered.
11 times more.
And so I lost money through spending all the time doing it. But, it was, to me, I was just like, Yeah, it just felt, good. Just taking on even some of these small cases and then just pushing it. Because if you're gonna take a case, let's push it all the way and not, be pushed around by insurance companies. And so that feels good. And here's so on that vein, there's, we have these policy limits, right? That kind of limits how much people can get. So there's a policy, of, like 100,000. And the insurance company, they weren't settling. They wanted to get like next to nothing. And so
Mm.
finally, oh great, we'll just file then. So we just file, and then they're like, oh, okay, here's your $100,000. We're like, nope, too late, And then we get a lot more than that, and they actually then pay it, even though that was the policy limit. They had to pay more than, because they missed out on the opportunity. So, just things like that when you like really, keep the insurance company to the fire, and you utilize the court systems, and you don't just be a settlement mill. Those things make me feel good when you really just, litigating and fighting and getting good results even beyond what, would be typical. It just makes me feel good, even if it's just small little cases like that.
Well, I think it's a matter of justice, like you said, and
Right.
I think that's important. In fact, my name and my namesake, Justice Justin, it's always in there. So I always felt kind of drawn to law as well. I went a different path, but I looked at law school for a long time for exactly that reason, is I wanted to fight back and represent the little guy. And
Yep.
uh, yeah, I think one of the things I've always loved about the PI model, personal injury model, is you guys work usually on a contingency fee, right? So you don't
Right.
even get paid unless you get a win for the client, and that's huge for the clients because if they don't, most people don't have money to afford an attorney anyway, let alone if you just got injured and now you can't work and you got to replace your car and everything else, and you've got hospital bills mounting up and everything else. Like, that is the worst position to be in. And injury attorneys, you kind of fill a very necessary, you step into the breach, right? You are the gap between these people just languishing and their shot at getting some restitution, which I've always appreciated. So, um, here's a side question, but I'm always intrigued because I know that working in the legal space, you probably have dealt with some absolutely just bonkers situations, some absurd moment. Maybe a witness said something crazy, or a judge did something weird, like your first case you'd mentioned. But what's one of the most absurd things, Jerry, that you've encountered in your practice of law?
Yeah, we'll talk. You said witness. So we're at a jury trial. It's probably, I don't know, 17 years ago or while, we're at the jury. We have a week-long federal jury trial, and one of the witnesses just was just saying just ridiculous things, and it was like the other side's star witness. And so, in closing, I'm thinking, okay. And the jury heard, this person say all these crazy things. So I'm giving my closing, and I walk up, where like the witness stand where they give their testimony, right? And I walk up and I sit in the witness stand, and I mimicked her. And I just started saying the things that she said. And then I just looked at the jury and go, you heard it. She actually said that, and it was just like, boom. And it just changed it made a difference. So that was kind of fun. There's been well, I love this stuff because it's never a dull moment, right?
Yeah.
Some of it's very similar kind of things, but you're dealing with real things and real people, and so it's kind of exciting, even though it's the same old, it's still exciting. So.
No, it's fair. So what's your favorite thing about being a lawyer? Is it getting in there and getting in a trial? Is it the win? Is it the helping of the client? Like, what drives you to love to do what you do so much?
Well, yeah, obviously, I mean, it sounds so cliche, but I do. I love, you know, getting, handing my client, well, a couple things. With my client, sometimes we're helping them really get the medical needs they need, and trying to help them figure that out, because a lot of people, they don't know what they're doing, navigate, just helping them on that side of things. But then in the end, you'll give them a big check, like, hey, here's, several $100,000 or whatever it is, or here's $1 million. I love doing that, but it's jury trials. I love doing jury trials. I like, I have a good team around me that's doing a lot of the prep work for me, a lot of the paperwork, and then I like going in and connecting with the jury and helping them see, the truth, what's going on, and being able to get the funds. So jury trial is probably my number one thing.
Gotcha. So what does it look like going to trial? If somebody is injured, well, let's start soup to nuts, right? Somebody gets in a car accident on 435 and somebody plows in the back and whatever it is. What should they do starting in that initial moment? Because a lot of people don't even know, like, what do I do? Do I call the cops? Do I call my insurance? Do I go to the hospital? At what point do I call Jerry or
Right. No, those are
whoever?
great. Well, I've had people call me at the scene of a wreck before, hey, what do I do? Usually it's like clients of mine that, from, over the years, what do I do? And I'll walk them through it. But a couple of things, yeah, get the police there, get them there. Don't just be like, oh, yeah, we'll figure it, because a lot of times that person who caused the wreck will change their story, or
Yep.
there's no witnesses at that point, so get the police there because they're going to create a record of what happened. And so that's essential. Number two, call your insurance company. You don't need to talk about the facts of the case other than, yep, this other person caused the wreck. Don't talk about, oh, I'm just fine. Because the reality is, I have some people, they need to go to the emergency room right there, and you should go. You need to get checked out. But sometimes you have adrenaline going on, and this is very common. They don't know until like the next day, or even maybe 2 or 3 days later. Maybe they have a TBI, a concussion or something, and it really starts affecting them. And insurance companies, they let it go, well, they didn't even go to the ER. They're just fine, right? So start getting checked out, because, your physical health is important. Start getting those things. And then, call us, because we'll be able to, kind of run it through and talk through the numerous other issues of a case, and be able to help get you lined up, with good treatment. And people that, if you go to the ER room, the reality is, they serve a good purpose, but they're very trauma driven, in, out, right? And just, oh, you're bleeding. Okay, we got that. Okay, now you're good. So, we try to get you seen by people who are really going to evaluate what's going on. And, oh, you said your back's hurting. Well, it's not just here, take some medicine and go home. It's, well, maybe we need to do an MRI now, right? Maybe we need, do x-rays. We get and get baselines, what's going on. And so, those are the kind of things, we really want to help somebody out with. So that's the start. When somebody comes in, if we do take on the case, like you said, it's almost always, we're going to do it on a, contingency basis. So it's no risk to them. They don't even have to have if they come see us, that doesn't mean they have to sign up with us, right? And we try not to pressure them. And I'll a lot of times tell people, hey, you take your time and do it. But there's sometimes they actually need to go fast because there's things going on. So, but I try not to pressure them. I just don't like that kind of pressure. But eventually, when they get signed up, we send out letters of representation to the different parties, right? To the insurance companies that caused it, as well as to their own insurance companies. So we can start figuring out, what are the policy limits that's in place? What are the, do the person actually have insurance? Because a lot of times the police report will say, oh, they have, State Farm. And then we call State Farm and they're like, oh, nope, that coverage is lapsed, and so we got to, start figuring out where we're at. So we do that, and then we start helping them with the treatment. We end up getting demands. We try, most cases, the vast majority of cases are resolved, settled without having to file cases. But you have to be willing to file cases. We do it regularly. We filed several last week. We're going to file several this week, right? And that's what keeps the insurance company honest. It's not the insurance commission. It's the threat that, oh, this attorney goes to trial and they file things, and that we're going to make them pay a lot more if they don't, that kind of thing. And to go to, of course, what I love to do, trial. And so that's, again, most cases don't go to trial, but we love to do it, and we're happy to do it if it's the best alternative for the client.
How often do cases settle versus go to trial?
Oh, I would say, 95%, settle without, having to utilize court. But when we go to trial, that's when, start doing the, I have fun.
What's your favorite lawyer movie?
Oh, I would have to say, probably My Cousin Vinny.
No.
It's just good. It's just funny, and it's pretty accurate for evidence.
I've heard so many attorneys say exactly that. This is actually oddly accurate.
Oh, really? It's true. It's just like, that's how you do it, and it's persuasive and accurate, and that's fun.
I was just curious about that. Let's go back to talking about injuries, though. What is the maximum someone can get at trial, right? Does it depend on whether they're insured, whether the other person is insured? Does it depend on where the injury happens? Is it different on Kansas City versus Missouri? Or sorry, I don't know why I keep doing that. I live in Northeast Kansas. I totally understand, but I keep saying Kansas City when I mean Kansas versus Missouri. My brain is just, I'm watching the radar as well. I think you and I are both about to get smacked by something. There
Oh,
is a
I'm seeing
chance.
stuff. I'm seeing some
There's a
lightning. I
chance
don't know if you can
we'll
see
have to
it.
postpone half of this interview till later. We'll see, but because we're both in the same little network here.
Yep.
But so tell me about limits, right? What
Yeah. All
factors are in
right.
place?
Well, let's talk about, you said things that make a difference. Hey, the county makes a difference. If you get injured in Jackson County and you want to have a jury trial, guess what? Jackson County jurors might give, $4 million on a case a Johnson County juror might give $200,000 on. Now, that's probably a gross overstatement, but it's just, different jurors have different, kind of mentalities and different thoughts on it, conservative versus more liberal. So that does make a difference. A couple things that make a difference for, what maximum. First of all, uh, policy limits make a difference, right? Now, if you gave them a chance to settle within policy limits and they didn't settle, let's say, for example, that policy limit was $100,000 and you said, hey, we're willing to settle for 100, and then you later get a judgment for $2 million. It's possible that they ended up just paying the full 2 million because they're insured wasn't protected right? Because they could have protected their insured by settling and they didn't. So their insured has what we call a bad faith claim. And so sometimes, to avoid it, they'll just pay the full judgment amount, or, we could end up, agreeing to tell, that insured, hey, your insurance didn't protect you. So why don't you assign to us the bad faith claim? And in return, we'll not, garnish your wages and do things like that. And so then we can end up, having a bad faith case that could be worth multi-millions. So, but, a lot of times the settlement phase, the max you can get is whatever those policy limits are. But even then, just because there's a policy limit for, let's say, $1 million or whatever, doesn't mean you're going to get $1 million. You have to back it up with the damages and that there actually is liability and stuff like that. One interesting thing, Kansas used to have a statutory cap on non-economic damages. And non-economic damages are, well, let me break it up. So economic damages are things like what your hospital bills are, your lost wages, things like that. Where non-economic damages are like your pain and suffering. Now, some people hear, pain and suffering, nobody should get pain and suffering. And that's just why? Why do the people have that thought? I don't understand. Let's say you have to use a diaper for the rest of your life. Well, that's a pain and suffering? That's not fair. And you should be compensated, and the anguish that you have to go through and the things that you miss out on. Those are non-economic damages. Used to be capped out it was 250, and then there was on a scale like up to 350 anyway, over depending on the year. And that could, for example, if you had to wear diapers the rest of your life because somebody messed something up, would you say, oh yeah, $250,000, that's plenty? No.
I would be less than thrilled with that.
Right. And so, the Supreme Court the Kansas Supreme Court in 2019 said, guess what? The Constitution says that these kind of issues shall be decided by a jury. We've all heard that, right? A jury of your peers. And so how is it that we are allowing the legislature for so many years to limit it? So now that's deemed unconstitutional, that statute. So it's unlimited. Now, if it's some ridiculous number that, they'll obviously appeal it and you can have arguments, but those things, so things that are limiting are what the actual damages are, policy limits, and and there are other cases like wrongful death cases where there still are caps and there are nuances to that. But those are things, you argue, in argument. So, but I think, in jury, the very first thing in a jury trial, well, of course, there's stuff leading up to it. There's the pretrial litigation, and then you got to do discovery. But when you actually get to that jury trial, the first thing that happens, of course, the judges welcome everybody, but you're going to have to go through this process we call a jury selection, right? And you're not actually selecting the juries. You're actually deselecting those ones who you feel would be biased or partial. a jury select, it's like water. I have a chance to like talk to the jurors, right? And one of the things that, by the way, I'm thinking of in my head is what kind of jurors are going to limit how much damages they're going to give, because they're maybe have a mindset that's like, oh, we don't get pain and suffering, or we don't do things like that. So, but that's a partiality they have that's unfair. So that's the first step of a jury trial, is going through that water where I'm questioning them, and I really get to just talk to them and connect with them. And I try to be very like authentic in that step. I remember in a case probably 15 years ago, we were doing jury trial, and I was really connecting with them, and we were really talking back and forth. And the other side objects, objection, judge, he's just having a conversation with the jurors. And the judge was like, yeah, that's what he's supposed to do. But it's just rarely done, right? Most people are just like, I see no hands for calls. Just really just kind of just stoic, where you really want to connect with them. So, and then you ask questions like, and this all started because you were asking about damages. I might ask a question like, now, who has preferences? There's nothing wrong with preferences. Who has maybe biases against that word pain and suffering? Who would say, well, no, I just don't think pain and suffering should be allowed? Or who has a bias against, if I'm going to ask for $2 million. Who here just right away says, oh, doesn't matter what the evidence is, I'm not going to award $2 million. Who has and it's okay if you have those kind of biases. And I could try to, figure that out. And then I would ask the judge, in the end, judge, the case law is clear that they are to be impartial, not have bias. They've already indicated a bias about this, and then have them removed for cause, right? And so that way I don't have to use my peremptory. And then at the end, you get 3 peremptory removals for any reason. Well, you can't, for racial or gender, improper things like that. But then you try to get as many as you can for cost, so you don't have to use your peremptory charges. And so that's the first step of a jury trial. And already I'm thinking about what's going to, limit the damages and that I'm going to be able to get for my client.
Gotcha. So what happens when the actual damages are significantly more than the policy limit? Is it possible to get more for the client than the policy limit allows? And if so, how does that happen? Or is that just, too bad, so sad?
Yes and no, and yes and no. And so at the demand, so really when you contract to have insurance, really you're just contracting for the right to be able to sue them and the right to be able to be protected. So let's say I contract for the minimum policy amount, which is $25,000, right? So if I ran into you and injured you, there's at least $25,000 available. Now, mind you, that those limits were set in 1984 by our legislature. It wasn't enough decades ago.
Right.
Let's say you were in the horrible wreck, 25,000, and you have an option. You can either sue me personally and get more than, but you'd have to, do garnishments and all that, or the insurance is only on the hook for that 25,000 that I contracted for, right? So you send a demand to my insurance company, say, hey, Jerry Wallentine severely injured me. We demand the full 25,000. If that insurance company refuses, well, then they didn't protect me, right? Because now you could come after me and get more against me. And so then I will then go against the insurance company and say, they gave you a chance to settle. You didn't. You better pay the full judgment amount. And so now your lawyer and you could get $2 million or whatever it is, right? Because they're probably going to pay it or be thinking about paying it. Otherwise, I'm going to be suing my insurance company for not protecting me. Now, all that being said, there's a lesson in all this, and that is this. You as a tactic for an attorney, you get those letters out and give them a chance to settle sometimes. And then, and hopefully they don't settle. There are times where you don't want them to settle, and you can sometimes get more, but you just got to think about it. But on the other side, this is way ahead of time. Hopefully you're thinking to yourself, Justin, what are my policy limits? Because if you only have $25,000 and you hurt somebody for $1 million, you might be sunk, right? And they just sue you personally. So you want to do 2 things. One, get enough limits to really provide protection so you're going to be covered. But number 2, for yourself, get underinsured or uninsured. for like 250,000 or $1 million. So that way, if you injure somebody, or no, better yet, you get into a wreck with somebody that has $25,000 policy limits. Well, like we said, you might only be able to get $25,000, but if you have, let's say, $250,000 underinsured, you get the 25,000 from the person who injured you, plus an additional, the difference. So in this case, $225,000 from your own insurance. So as a professional, you want to make sure you have significant uninsured and underinsured coverage, as well as liability coverage to protect yourself, as well as the other people that, are involved in wrecks. And so that's just, I learned that, probably 20 years ago, right as I went to law school, as I was kind of learning about these different things. And so my wife and I, we significantly increased it. So we were protected if something like that happens. So those are, unfortunately, it's the reality that, policy limits can come into play. So you really want to, handle that ahead of time.
Gotcha. No, that makes perfect sense. Related to that, there's certain statutes that prevent how much you can get. It is what it is. What about statutes of limitation on like time, right? Is there a time frame? Is it different on Kansas side versus Missouri side? Is it,
Yes.
roughly what is it? Does it matter if it's a slip and fall versus a traffic accident versus medical malpractice versus a dog bite? What is the time limit? What do people need to be aware of?
All right. So generally in Kansas, this is just general. So, you can't just be like, watch this video and go, oh, I saw the video and he said this, because each case is unique. But here's just in generalities. A negligence case, so that'd be like a car wreck, or maybe a dog bite, or is 2 years in Kansas for negligence. In Missouri, it's 5 years now, but that's changing. They're talking about change, and it depends if it's medical malpractice, negligence, or what kind it is. Other things you got to think of: if it's an intentional tort, let's say a sexual assault or a battery, or somebody actually, let's say it's a dog bite, somebody sicked their dog on you, so it's intentional. 1 year, and that's interesting because insurances, they're not really, don't have to pay for intentional torts, but we've seen homeowner insurances and there are reasons why they will cover. A very important thing to also be aware of is, like I said, there's different, depending on the situation, but there's what we call statute of repose, for example. And minors. So typically minors, their statute doesn't begin to run until they're 18, and then they have a year after they turn 18. But even that's not true, because then there's a statute of repose that it's a maximum of 8 years. So let's say they're 3, and then so 8 is just, then after 11 they have until they need to file. So there's just so many different things to play, but the statute of limitations are harsh, because if you don't get your case filed within that statute of limitations, you're out of luck. And the courts, uphold those statutes. So you and that's another reason, right? When you're injured, don't play around. Don't wait till the last second. Get it on file. Talk to an attorney, get it on file. I just don't take cases if it's last minute, because there's so many things. But with that being said, it was just 2 months ago. There's a client, sometimes somebody comes in, it's just last second. I'm like, why'd you wait forever? And I need to know this. But sometimes I'll feel sorry for somebody and I'll be like, all right, we'll take it. We get it on file for them. But don't do that to your attorney. Let them have a chance to get it worked up and help, because usually there's things that need to be done to make the case better and to help. But that's a real issue.
No, that makes perfect sense. So let me ask you a little bit more about yourself. What role does your faith play in shaping your approach to your clients and your cases? Being in PI, you have to deal with some gory things sometimes. I'm sure you've seen grisly scenes, injury photos. You deal with deaths, children that lose their parents, parents lose their children, entire families maybe even being wiped out in a car accident. It happens. It's bad. How do you handle that, right? How do you personally handle it? How do you help your clients handle that? What role does your faith play in that?
So, I don't, we don't have, pictures of a fish on our thing. We don't call ourselves a Christian law firm. We just organically, because I just don't want to utilize the name of Christ in a way that's just trying to I don't know. But we organically, we love the Lord, and so I don't have this policy, we're a Christian firm, so I'm going to pray with every client. and because that just seems inauthentic. And so, but there are times where in tough situations where it's just like, let's just pray for a little bit. And so we do just do that. And you're just being, sensitive to the spirit. And so, but, I don't try to play that up as like a gimmick. It's just, it could be gimmicky, and I just don't want that. I want to be authentic about that. I can say it makes a difference, in the case I believe in what I'm doing. I believe the Lord's helping me do what I'm doing. In fact, I feel like we've seen successes in cases beyond my abilities. I think just the Lord is giving me a spirit and giving me a blessing. I know that just sounds so cheesy, but I believe it to be true. And the same with a lot of my paralegals, just the way things happen, there's just an anointing. I wasn't planning on talking about this, but you asked, and so I'm just giving you the real
What I
answer.
do, man. It's what I do. I probe and I probe and I poke and I try to get the good meat out, right? Well, let me ask you a related question. How do you balance being aggressive in court but being respectful, being client centered and whatnot? How do you balance being driven and making your point and whatnot while being human or humane?
Well, I think in general, I try to address, very respectfully with everybody I'm trying to deal with. But there are times where, like it was where they don't deserve the respect, and even when people don't deserve it, sometimes you still give it, right? We want to be gracious, but there are sometimes you have to make the point. And because look, we're in court, and let's just be straight up. And there can be an actual authenticity to disrespect. For example, I'll go to when I got up on the stand and I was just mimicking and saying the things she said. That's pretty disrespectful. But you know what? It was totally appropriate with that case and what things that were being said. Um, so, I think I think you should go at it with that attitude. I'm going to try to get along. I'm going to be respectful. But then there are times where you sense, no, it's not appropriate here to be respect, and we have to be more aggressive. For example, with an expert, well, and a lot of it depends on, like, who you're doing. Like if you have an expert witness who's just the hired gun for the insurance company, you know, they make me mad because they're just getting paid money just to say whatever. But even then, I'll try to be respectful. But I'll, without any hesitation, be able to point out, well, you said this, but the reality is this is the truth. And and so you're just combating. I'm not yelling. I'm not, but you just use the facts and the truth.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. What's one of the biggest misconceptions people bring into your office when they're looking to hire an attorney? Like, I'm sure that you deal with some common things that people always think you can or can't do. What I guess what are the biggest misconceptions you like to, if I can say, disabuse potential clients of about you and
Yeah,
your role in your firm?
yeah. With several, I would say the first one is, we're not gonna, attorneys lie and cheaters. That's what, they think. That's just, we're not going to lie for you. We are not going to let you lie. We're going to utilize the truth. And so, we do that, and we make that pretty clear. And number two is, people do have a misconception. Some people just feel bad about filing lawsuits. And they think, and I help them and say, no, that's what we have the system. And yeah, again, the Bible talks about that, but it's really, that's an illustration. We should be trying to work out the differences within the church leadership. But how many times is that, you're going to correct with somebody, and usually it's just, this is not how it's going to work in, with these kind of cases. So I try to help them see, no, this is a just thing that we're doing here. And we're actually seeking justice. We're not doing something that's inappropriate. We're doing something that's righteous and right, and helping them that, and then they see it. And then when they go to the doctor, don't just try to be like, oh, I can suffer through, oh, I'm fine, when they're not. I'm like, no, be honest about it. Now,
Yeah.
don't make up stuff. But then I'm finding clients, they're like making up oh, I'm okay. And that's what gets put in the record, and they weren't, so those kind of things. And I think another misconception is, they think, oh, I just can't trust the attorney. And then the vast majority of times, well, a lot of times, clients, they come because they know me or there's referrals, so there's a built trust initially. Well, sometimes there are people they don't know me and it wasn't a referral, and they have this certain level, and then they start realizing right away, oh, yeah, Jerry and they really want to help. Oh, they're not just trying to, just get rich off me. They're really trying to, and I think that's just a big misconception. So by the end, they realize, oh man, he's really in this to just help people. And that's just even as I say it, people probably like, yeah, whatever. But I like overcoming that misconception people have. And then at the end, they're like, they feel like, we cared for them and did right by them.
It's neat to work in a position where legitimately helping people is profitable and works for everyone.
Right. It's both. It is. That's probably a fun thing about this. And it is. It is I love doing this because I'm helping people, but it is profitable. And and so it works together. And so it's a fun thing.
What are the trends coming down the pipeline that you see in the PI space, particularly in the rise of dash cams and mobile phones and AI driven cars and everything else? What has changed since you got started, almost 2 decades ago or whatever it was, and what are the big changes you see coming down the pipeline?
Man, technology for sure. And I wonder about that. I wonder about what the future is going to be in 10 years. I mean, when we get full AI, powered vehicles, I mean, they're already out there and they're already, sometimes with semi trucks, and how's that going to impact? Because, really, was anybody negligent? And then it just becomes even more difficult at litigation. You're actually it's like a products liability came that you're having to sue, the manufacturer. Right now, I'm suing, for the most part. Some we do product liability, but for the most part, we're suing the driver. But it could be more difficult if it's like, oh, actually, the thing that caused this wreck, the driver did fine, but the brakes were malfunctioning, and then it just makes it much, much more sophisticated. And I think it's going to make the entry level for new attorneys very difficult. And I think it's going to make it for the little guy, the big firms that are, taking on those kind of things, they're not going to take cases unless it's hundreds or millions of dollars in damages. So I think a lot of people, it's going to miss out on a lot of justice. That's not going to get done. I think that's going to happen. But talking about dash cams, we love dash cams, because a lot of times, especially like in trucks, they have them equipped, and then sometimes they'll try to hide, what happened if somebody gets, dies or something. But there's dash cams, and you just got to be on top of, sending out, your experts to, get that stuff downloaded, before it gets, removed or something. So technology is probably the biggest.
Gotcha. Well, here in a minute, sorry, somebody knocking at my door and they're seeing the weather as well. And I know I can see there's literally, I might even share this with the listeners, but there is a storm the size of Kansas City about to hit Kansas City. So it's probably in everyone's best interest that we wrap up this call just for safety's sake. I don't want to put you in any unnecessary harm's way. So here in a minute, Jerry, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you my two closing questions. Question number one is, if you can go back in time, meet young Jerry and give him some advice, what advice would you give yourself, and why? Other than the obvious, which, is buy a lot of Bitcoin and hold it till it, crosses the 100K. Right. And then question number two is, if I gave you my magic pen, and this magic pen comes from St. Benedict's Abbey in Atchison, Kansas, right here where I live. It's a monastery of Catholic monks, and one of the priests must have blessed this pen because it seems to have miraculous powers. It can strike a law from the book, it can add a law to the books, or edit a law that's on the books. And if I were to loan you my miraculous pen, what change would you make and why? While you percolate on that, we're going to jump over, take a look at your site one more time, and read from our final sponsor. Again, I am talking to Jerry Wallentine, or Wally Wallentine, if you prefer, who runs the eponymous law firm that bears his name. That is Wallentine Law in the Kansas City area, both Kansas City, Kansas, and Kansas City, Missouri. You can visit him online at kc-attorney.com. That's kc-attorney.com. You can also call him at either area code in the Kansas City area. That's 913 or 816-934-NEED. That's 6333. So 913-934-6333 or 816-934-6333. And as always, we will always have links to his his information down below. Our final sponsor for today is Rank with News. If there was a guaranteed way to get your law firm or your business featured in major national publications like Yahoo News, Business Insider, Bloomberg, and others, and have them ranking locally, even nationally, sometimes in under 8 hours for major competitive keywords that people were actually looking for, what else would you need to know? Rank with News is simply the most powerful way to hit page one quickly, oftentimes in under 2 weeks, safely and organically. It's like guaranteed SEO or search engine optimization on steroids, ranking quickly and sticking long term. If you're tired of poor visibility for your business, visit rankwith.news to learn more and book a time to speak with one of our specialists about featuring your firm in major national 8-figure sites that can launch you to page one in a matter of hours and help you dominate your local marketplace. Get media exposure, rank higher in Google, build credibility, and win more customers and clients with rankwith.news. All right, so Jerry, you and I, the storm is coming, but it strikes, and somehow our connection magically takes us back in time, and we meet young Jerry fresh out of law school, and you're able to go over without breaking the space-time continuum and give yourself just a little, couple sentences of advice. What advice would you give to yourself?
I think read more. If I could have gone back in time and just been reading about plaintiff personal injury from day one, that would have, just been on my mind, forming me. I think I would have done that. And I don't think I would change being in ministry, for all those years. I used to think, oh man, what if I would have been a personal injury lawyer from day one instead of 9 years ministry? But that was just such good times. And the Lord wasn't having me do that because he really needed my help. He was doing that because he was forming me and developing me for, to become a better lawyer. So, yeah.
Yeah. Key personal development and character formation, I think, is very, very important. And those are the things that do make us who we are. So it's good. All right. So miraculous pen time, Jerry. I give you my miraculous pen. And with this pen, again, you can change a law. It can be a major law with sweeping national ramifications. It can be a stupid local law that just gets rid of parking tickets in the Missouri side, right? What law would you change and why?
Well, if I really could, it would be a national, but we'd be talking about politics for a while and things that can make a difference. I'll keep it local, just like just a big thing for what we were talking about. I think I would have in 1984 when they made that $25,000 minimum policy. That's just so many people do not get it. It needs to be something. It should have been at least like $100,000 back then, and then it should have been put on to increase with inflation every year. And that way the people would be getting more justice. And right now there's just too many people, they're just hurt and there's nothing they can do. Then get something to pay for a portion of the medical bills, and that's it. It's just awful. So I changed that. I mean, keeping it something topical.
No, that's totally fine. That makes perfect sense, and I totally understand. I remember growing up in the 80s and watching old school Price is Right and even Monty Hall, Let's Make a Deal, and I just remember watching it later in reruns, and you'd see that the car, this brand new Ford whatever, and it was like a $3,000 vehicle, and you're like,
right,
$3,000? How is that a brand new vehicle? But that was inflation. So if you're $25,000 back then was the cost of what, 4 to 8 new cars. For most people, that would mean a lot, but especially in modern money, that just is it's a pittance. That's a overnight stay.
None of those funds, it's it goes to the medical bills and all these other things. The client, how much are they going to get out of it? We try to get them as much as we can, but it's just it's frustrating.
Well, Jerry, thank you very much for taking the time to meet with me and talk to my listeners today. I do always like to let my guests have the final word. Are there any parting words of wisdom or last thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Man, thank you for having me on, Justin. Hey, don't hesitate to call us. I mean, even if it's not a case we take, we love developing the relationship and just having be able to chance to just talk to you. And the vast majority of people we call us, we don't take the case, but we try to help them, send them to the right attorney, and just have that connection for later, man.
Awesome. That makes perfect sense. So there you heard it here, folks. If you're lonely and you're bored, call.
Not what I said.
I'm just kidding. Well, Jerry, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me and my listeners. This has been The Attorney Post. I am, as always, your host, Justin West. Again, I've been chatting with Jerry Wallentine of Wallentine Law. That's casey-attorney.com. We will, as always, have a link down below in the descriptions. As always, though we do talk about a lot of legal matters on this podcast does not itself constitute legal advice. And if if you find yourself in the need of legal advice, please seek a competent attorney in your area who focuses on the matter that you need help with. Now, obviously, if you're in the Kansas City area, Casey Mo, KCK, I think Jerry would be a phenomenal resource for you. And so again, we have his information down below. Please feel free to reach out to him and get the knowledge you need to make sure that your rights are protected. As far as the podcast goes, if you're watching us on YouTube, we always appreciate a like, a subscribe, and a share. If you're on any other podcast repositories, rate us, review us, whatever it happens to be. But the most important thing you can do is if you know somebody who would benefit from the information in this podcast, please share this podcast with them. Why? Because if they don't know their rights, they don't have any. The same goes for you. Until next time, I'm Justin. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.